Wonderful. Welcome to the second installment. Thank you for being here. This is IHC MasterClass, where each Sunday, over the course of 6 Sundays, we are speaking to our very own masters, musical masters that we at IHC have the opportunity to work with on a regular basis. And I'm thrilled, and I've been very much looking forward to introducing you to the man behind the organ. Dr. Michael Messina is here with us today. Hello, Dr. Messina. Thank you for
Hello.
joining us.
Thank you for
I
having me.
I considered reading your bio aloud and kind of introducing you formally that way because you are such a humble human being. But the truth is, you are a very familiar face to all of us who have spent years at IHC and have thoroughly enjoyed the High Holy Days. And so I suspect you will tell us a little bit about yourself and how you relate to IHC and your relationship there. But what many of you maybe don't know is my relationship with Michael. So when I first accepted the position as Cantor at IHC, I had a wonderful long conversation with Cantor Janice Roger. She was extremely supportive and told me all kinds of great things about what the congregation was doing musically, where we had come from, where we potentially could go. And she said to me, and I don't doubt you will love Michael, and introduced me to Michael via email. And at the time, I knew nothing of you, and you knew nothing of me. And email very quickly developed into a phone conversation where, if I remember correctly, I said to you, so I'm just going to put this out there. I'm Canadian and I really believe in a British choral sound. And he responded by saying, I think we're going to be great friends. And ever since that day, a man who I think was probably graciously going to do one more High Holy Day season to help the new cantor, has quickly become my best friend in Indianapolis and a source of musical inspiration. And he knows full well that he can't go anywhere. So without further ado, Michael, welcome.
Thank
Thrilled
you.
to have you.
Thank you. So, what shall we talk about? Do you want me
Well,
to give you the boring, I was born in?
yes, I mean, we want all of those things. But tell us first a little bit about your relationship with IHC. So how long have you've been with IHC
So,
for how long?
so I had a great experience working at Temple Brith Kodesh in Rochester while I was a student and then a professional or a young professional in Rochester. And it was really, really formative. So when I moved to Indianapolis for my first full-time job at Trinity Episcopal Church, I quickly sought out the local Reformed congregation, and I didn't know Janice. And it's funny how time smooths memory. So I'm not sure if this is exactly how it happened, but it's probably pretty close. I made an appointment to meet with Cantor Roger, and I just bounded in and said, "Hi, I'm Michael Messina. I'm from Rochester. I just gotten this job at Trinity Church, and I love Reformed Judaism, and I just want to say hi." And I'm sure she was like, "Who is this guy, and what is he doing here?" I said, "I'm not looking for a job because there was currently there was a separate organist and choir director for the High Holy Day Choir, and I mean, I'm sure she was just thinking like, what does this guy want? But I just wanted to meet her and meet the congregation in a way. That was 1995. And then the organist, who then became the choir director also, Dwight Thomas, moved to Florida. And so Janice gave me a call and said, "Hey, would you consider coming and doing this?" And she was going on sabbatical in the year 2000. And so she said, "Come do this in 1999 with me, and we'll see how we work together, because next year I'm going to be on sabbatical, and I'm literally, you know, coming back from sabbatical the day before Rosh Hashanah, or within the week before Rosh Hashanah, and I don't want to hand you this job if without knowing that you can do it. And so we started working together in 1999, and then I kind of flew solo in 2000, and she came back, and it's now been 22 years.
I love that.
That's the
That is
short version.
the Cliff Notes version. And there she is. Hi, Cantor Roger. We were just chatting about Michael's relationship with IHC. So take us back. Take us back to, you were born in Kansas City.
Kansas City, Missouri. I was raised in a German Lutheran church. I went to the parish school until I went to junior high and high school. I was involved in music, of course, throughout that time. I started piano when I was 8. I started playing the organ for church when I was 13.
So being raised in the German Lutheran tradition, for those who may not know, is a heavily musical experience. You are steeped in music. Tell us what that looked like and what that felt like growing up. What kind of music?
So it was a lot of Bach, as you can imagine. It was probably not a distinctive musical program, but it was a large musical program. And so I sang, in the kids choir from the time I was in kindergarten on up. And then I joined the adult choir when my voice changed. And then the next thing I knew, I was playing the organ. And so I went from there to a Lutheran college, St. Olaf College. Betty White makes everybody know who St. Olaf is. And from St. Olaf, and there I studied church music. I think the first time I ever played for a Reformed congregation, it was actually Temple B'nai Yehuda in Kansas City, which is where Rabbi Brett grew up. But of course, he was like 13 at the time, but I didn't really get to know Reformed Judaism and musical practices and all that until I went to Rochester. I went to the Eastman School of Music, where I did my master's and doctorate in organ performance and lit. Just by chance, the job came open at Brit Kodesh, and someone recommended that I get it. And so I got it, and the rest is history there. But there I came in contact with Sam Adler, who, to me, he was the big shot because he was the head of the composition department at Eastman. But I didn't realize I had yet to learn what a luminary he was in the field of American Reformed Jewish music and composition. And he was a great mentor to me as far as, Reform musical practices. He would take me to lunch and say, that was really good, but you should change that Sa'usha Arim because it's really silly. And we need something that's just much more majestic. And so he was very formative influence in me.
So I'm going to ask you to break down some of this for us for a second, because as I've said, my friend is a very humble human being. So Eastman School of Music, top music school. I mean, just the top of the top. And Betty White did not make St. Olaf famous. I will argue that the music and musicians in the world make St. Olaf what it is. Top musical schooling from the very beginning. The doctorate is a doctorate of musical arts. It is a performance degree. So you're performing all the time. Tell me about Eastman. You had how many jobs when you were in Rochester?
So at first I was just a master's student, and then I got a church job to pay some bills. And then what happened was that, I finished the master's degree in about a year and a half. And my teacher said, "Oh, you want to start a doctorate?" And I said, "Okay, I'll start a doctorate." And I approached the doctorate with much less enthusiasm because it's longer and harder, and it's just, and I really enjoyed. I got tired of school. I mean, I had gone to like the 35th grade or something like that, And so at that time, I picked up a church job. I picked up the job at Temple Brith Kodesh. I was teaching for the Episcopal Diocese of Rochester. I was teaching at the seminary, Colgate Rochester Divinity School, and I was tutoring at Eastman in the theory department. So I had 5 jobs, and I went from being a student to being kind of a townie. I probably spent more time in the car driving from job to job than I did, actually working. But yeah, and so I was in I was in Rochester for 9 years, and then I came here. Trinity was my first full-time job.
So I will say that over the course of just the last couple of years, Jim and I have had the opportunity to get to know Michael and Mark well, and we've enjoyed getting to know you guys thoroughly, and we've become good friends. And we often joke about how Michael was underground for an entire decade, if not more, locked in a practice room because there are pop culture references that we all laugh about you just not knowing, right? That there was at least a decade in there, where my favorite is when we were out for dinner and Jim, my husband, said something about the Wu-Tang Clan, and I think Michael said they sounded like a lovely group of Asian gentlemen, and I was like, no, that's not the Wu-Tang Clan. So this is one of my favorite things to joke about with you. But so here's what I want to know. I get asked all the time, and I don't know if it's particularly because I'm a cantor, but as a singer, when you're in school and you're a vocalist, you take a church job. You become a ringer in the soprano section. You get paid to sing. And at one point I was singing a Catholic mass and then making my way to an evensong, and you bounce around doing church work. And so many people ask me frequently, oh, well, I didn't know that our choristers were not Jewish, right? Or I didn't realize, but I don't think the same is in the church world. Nobody was ever inquiring as to whether or not I was Catholic. I was a singer. And so I want to ask you for a second, because you're a tutor at Eastman, you're working in a seminary, you are also working at a church, and then every now and then, or I guess weekly, you are going to not just a temple. This is Temple Brith Kodesh with the one and only Sam Adler. So this is a big, big deal.
Well, and incidentally, also, I don't know if you remember, the first woman cantor in the Reform movement, Barbara Horowitz,
Yep.
was the cantor of Brith Kodesh. She was not there when I worked there. I followed her briefly, but yeah, it's a historic congregation. And our own Joan Rapkin grew up across the street.
So tell me, I think my question is twofold. So my first question is, did anyone at Brith Kodesh, have you ever felt questioned did you ever feel questioned in the synagogue setting as to whether or not you were Jewish?
No. There are several funny stories about this. The rabbi would say something. The rabbi was very good to me. Both rabbis were really good to me. And the cantor there was wonderful also. And he would say something that was really nasty or really sarcastic or something. And he'd look at me and he'd go, "Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't very Christian." And I mean, it was a joke. And I don't think anybody ever assumed that I was Jewish or not Jewish until my last Shabbat. The Shabbat just before I moved here, I grew very close to some of the choir members, and we had 2 Holocaust survivors in the choir, Kurt and Ruth Ensline. And I don't know how this opportunity presented itself, whether the rabbis offered it or whether I asked, probably very presumptuously. But on my last Shabbat there, they allowed me to chant the Haftarah. It was Bo was the parsha, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I had taught myself Hebrew with a little primer that was used in the religious school. And that was a funny story of why I even did that. I love languages, but the rabbi said, "Here, do some cue sheets." And I said, "Well, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before." And he said, "Oh, just take some old ones and change the date." And so I went to him one day and I said, "It says that there's a lenu on page 248." And I said, "But I can't see an alenu." And he points to the Hebrew characters and he goes, "Well, there it is. It's right there." And I said, "Well, I can't read that." And he goes, "Go get a primer and teach yourself Hebrew." And so, just because I'm a parrot and a language nut, I went and taught myself Hebrew, or not, of course, to speak it, but to read the letters. And of course, I had memorized Ve'ahavta and all the weekly chants and the weekly prayers from the prayer book. And so my last Shabbat, they allowed me to chant Haftarah. And again, it was like putting a 7-year-old in the driver's seat of a car. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing in the sense of I couldn't read trope, and Kurt was trying to teach me. He was just teaching me the melody by rote, and so I knew the basic shape of the melody, but um, I basically memorized it then and did it. And so at the end of that Shabbat, someone asked, "Well, why is he leaving?" And somebody said, "Oh, well, he's moving to Indianapolis for a church job." And they looked at the other person and said, "A church job? I thought he was a nice Jewish boy." So, and I had never really tried to pass. And incidentally, I then learned years later that Messina is a name that is very common among Sicilian Jews.
Wow,
It
that's
is. So
fascinating. I didn't
I'm
know that.
quite confident that centuries ago, my ancestors were Jewish.
I like to think that you at IHC is like me Sinai, which is what we say when a melody has kind of been around for so long that you just don't know its origins. So instead of Messina, you're kind of me Sinai. But I love that. So, question for you then about you grew up Lutheran, steeped in that life. You were all of a sudden in music school, going between seminary and what will become, I'm sure at the time, we didn't know that Sam Adler what would become Sam Adler, but a temple that would become kind of a center of musical Jewish life. How do you compare and contrast the worship lives of congregants?
In synagogues versus churches?
Yeah.
Um, well, I would say probably the most striking difference in the singing is that I think, at least in the Protestant church, it's probably not so true in the Catholic church, but in the Protestant church, there are times when it's just expected that the congregation will pick up the book, they'll rise to their feet, and they'll belt out some song, usually a hymn or a piece of service music, because congregational music making is so much a part of what Martin Luther was about, to bring the music of the people and to empower the worship and prayer of the people. And so it's just assumed that whether you have a good voice or not, you stand up and sing these things. Whereas I think my experience, and I realized that in 30 years, I've only worked in 2 different synagogues. My experience has been that the cantor is much more, and perhaps in parenthesis, and the choir are much more the leaders, and people sit in their pews and they may hum along, but there's not the same way of like standing up and being an equal, belter of melody. And I'm not saying one is better. I'm just saying that's my very superficial observation.
It's fascinating to me because you and I had the opportunity earlier this week to kind of unpack this. And I said, Michael, we had a hymnal. We tried. It failed, right? People were not standing up and belting out an alto part. Like it just wasn't. And we talked about how part of it could have been that Jews kind of post Shoah in North America were not standing up and belting out their Judaism in any way. that this was not something, particularly in the Midwest or perhaps in a place like Rochester, this is not, we don't yet feel confident saying who we are and raising our voices in that way. And so perhaps there was this idea of like dipping your toe in the pool, having just come out of the atrocity that our people did. Tell me about choral music, and what it does for you personally. Have you always been drawn to choral music?
Yes. As I said, I started singing in the church choir as a kid when I was 5 years old. I sang all through high school. St. Olaf, if you know anything about St. Olaf besides Betty White, and of course, Betty White has nothing to do with that college, but if you know anything about St. Olaf, you know it's the home of the famous St. Olaf Choir. I mean, I traveled the world for 3 years with the St. Olaf Choir. We went to China, Japan, went all over the United States singing concerts. And it's arguably the most famous college choir in the United States. Singing with a group of 80 people on stage in Carnegie Hall or at First Lutheran Church in Madison, Wisconsin, wherever. We would memorize our program and we would stand together and we would hold hands, which is a kind of upper Midwestern Lutheran quirk, that 80 people are holding hands on the risers. But it unites the group. And I remember, the conductor would do his magic with these beautiful hands. And we would all take a breath and you would feel the choir as one organism, just take a breath and go. It's so physically exhilarating and inspiring to be a part of a group like that, or any choir for that matter, but to use your voice to sing is just, I know later you're going to ask me like, what can I not live without? And the broad answer to that question is music. But I was thinking, okay, well, what kind of music? And I thought, the day when I won't be able to sing, God forbid, that will be a very sad day.
Right. Well, and I would go so far as to say, and I believe you agree, but it's also deeply spiritual. When you are breathing with the people around you, you become one. And I mean, I'll even say in Buberian terms, it's an I thou moment, right? When you are standing there, whether in performance or rehearsal or in a stairwell, and you breathe together, your hearts beat together, and it's religious. It truly is, no matter what you're singing.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask you to share your first musical example.
Which one?
Well, I think we should start with the Yismachu, actually.
Okay. All right. So this is a recording. When I was at Eastman, Sam became involved with Michael Isaacson and the Milken Family Archive of Jewish music, and a lot. And if you know this archive, it's everything. It's liturgical music, it's opera, it's symphony, it's jazz, it's whatever, but it's all Jewish music. And he would put together an ad hoc choir, and we would make recordings. And this particular recording is of a Yismachu by Isidor Fried, who was one of the I think the second wave of composers that came over fleeing the Holocaust. His livelihood, his work was in Philadelphia, but this is one of the selections that we recorded for the Milken series, and I'm going to just that for a second. And pardon my desktop; it's such a mess. Here we go. Yismachu.
without a Picardy third. I love it. I love it. I love it.
So that was recorded at my church there in Rochester. I was the organist for that recording, not the conductor. Sam did the conducting.
So these recordings are now part of the Millikan Archive of Jewish Music. And a young Michael Messina is the organist on those recordings with Sam Adler as the conductor. Michael, take me back. So I asked Cantor Roger this last week, and I thought it was a good question. So I'm going to ask you now. You moved here just shy of your 31st birthday. Is that correct?
On my 31st.
On your 31st birthday. Yeah. Okay. If you could give 31-year-old Michael some advice, what would you say?
Stay open. I don't know if this is true of all young people. I suspect it might be. I had a whole life plan worked out by the time I was 22. I was going to do this, and then I was going to have this kind of a job, and then I was going to move to this kind of a place. And it was all very logically laid out and ordered. And I think what we all know is that life happens a day at a time, and somehow you end up in a place. It may be the place you envisioned, but it may not be the place you envisioned. And so my first bit of advice would be to remain open to what you encounter, and to say yes unless there's a good reason to say no. Trinity always has been a great place in which to make music. The congregation has been incredibly good and generous and loving to me. And I never in a million years imagined that I would live in Indianapolis for 26 years. I thought, I'll be here for 5 to 10 years tops. But within the first 5 years, I had said yes to Cantor Roger, and other things happen. And so this is not advice I can credit myself with, but I had a choir member at Trinity say this to me. She said, I challenge you to go deeper. She said, you bounce along a lot like a rock on top of the water. And she said, and I want you to go deep and just associate and attach and invest. And those were very powerful words of advice, and I've tried to do those too.
Let's talk about those other things for a moment, because you said, well, I had met Cantor Roger and other things. So you are married.
Yeah.
You have a wonderfully supportive spouse. I frequently get the question about, is your husband a musician? And I just kind of laugh. I'm like, I couldn't be married to a musician. Are you nuts? And tell me why Mark is kind of a perfect opposite and also pairing for you.
He would tell you that he's not a musician, and of course he isn't as a profession. But he grew up with a wonderful music education, playing viola. Believe it. He says, I played viola by choice, not because he was a bad violinist that just got drafted there. But he is sensitive enough to music. He brings an outside perspective. I think we in the music world and we in the religious music sphere get involved in congregational life and just burrow our heads into this thing. And it's refreshing to kind of come out of it and have a perspective, a fresh perspective that says, well, that's crazy, or, oh, that's really wonderful. Do you realize what you have there? And so he is very supportive and able to offer, an unbiased kind of outside viewpoint in all of those matters.
One of my favorite times was when the four of us went to see the Tallis Scholars. So when I saw the sign after moving here, just a couple of months into living here, saw a big sign that the Tallis Scholars were coming. and I was over the moon, and they were coming. It must have been first night Hanukkah because the temple had a big program, and I spoke to Rabbi Brett and I said, I know it's Hanukkah, but these are the Tallis scholars, you know? And so I ended up leaving the temple like 20 minutes early to make it to our seats. And Michael and Mark and Jim and I sat down for this incredible performance. And after two pieces, Jim and Mark got up and they said, we'll be outside. Just come meet us when you're done. And because Michael and I were sitting there having this incredible musical experience, do you ever feel, so Jim has the ability to just kind of turn on Bach and listen. It's just, it just is what it is. I can't do that. People often ask me what music I listen to. Music is not ever in the background. It is forced to the foreground. And I don't have the ability to just listen and relax unless it's the perfect performance by the perfect artist of the perfect piece, So do you ever feel that your knowledge or profession has somehow like ruined the enjoyment of it for you? I don't know.
Well, I wouldn't say ruined the enjoyment, but I know exactly what you mean. You go get a massage, you go to yoga, and they put on that music that's in the background, and I'm like, please turn that off, or and
Yes.
and because my head will just be going, and I'll be analyzing, and I'll be singing. And the other night I was in here and I was listening to a friend's harpsichord recital, and to me harpsichord sounds like harpsichord. But Mark came home and he started making all of these physical gesticulations, because a lot of the melodic figuration is instrumental, it's not vocal, and so it just sounded really helter-skelter wild to him. And so again, it's interesting. What I think is just like normal to have another person, their
Right.
viewpoint. But anyway, I forgot exactly what your question was.
Well, my favorite is when I'm in an elevator and they're piping in some Mozart, Eine kleine Nachtmusik, like just some like Mozart standard, if you will. And then the ding of the next floor is in the wrong key. And I'm like, what is happening? Like Michael teaches me that I'm not the only person in the world who is distracted like this. Let's go to your second example. I think we should share the handle now.
Okay.
So set this up for us.
So actually, this is a pandemic recording. I do enjoy, all my degrees are in organ, and yet how I really make my living is directing choirs and running a program. But it's really wonderful to flex that muscle to play again and to be invited to go play at different places. So last fall, I went and played. They have a Wednesday, what they call a brown bag series at Trinity Cathedral in Cleveland. And what that really means is that they open up the cathedral at noon, and people come eat their lunch and listen to great music. And it's not always organ music, but anyway, I was on this series, and because of the pandemic, it was completely shut down, and they went, like we're doing now, virtual. And so it was me and the director of music of the cathedral and his assistant. They were assisting on both sides of me. And then there was a camera crew, a couple of iPhones and a camera set up. And then there was a producer down in the church. And then it was being broadcast on the cathedral's website. And so it was my first time to play a concert. Actually, there was one person in the room who was just enjoying it, but the rest of the people who were listening were online. These are two movements of a Handel concerto. This piece would have been performed by Handel wrote his organ concerti to be performed at intermissions of his oratorios, and he would improvise the parts. This particular arrangement is for organ solo, so you'll see me jump between different keyboards, playing the orchestra part and then playing the organ solo part. Whoever did the banner at the bottom of the thing made a mistake and said that this was the fifth organ concerto by by George Frederick Bach. So don't be distracted by that. Okay, so here we go. Sharing screen, optimize for video. And here it is.
Thank you. Thank you for that. What goes through your head as you watch that, as you watch it back?
It's interesting, huh? I don't know. I mean, I was generally pleased with the performance.
What goes through your head as you're playing it?
Uh, I guess just, the music is what better be going through my head, because the minute I start thinking about what I'm having for dinner tonight, or, how many letters or emails I have yet to answer, then that's when I get into trouble, because of course you just have to stay in it. So, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that music, if you really commit yourself to singing or playing or whatever you do, if you're not in it in that moment, you know, it's not worth anything. But when you're in it, it's everything.
Tell me how a year of having our voices silenced is going to change how you emerge, or how you play when you emerge from this, and how you conduct and how you connect with music in general.
I really don't know. I mean, first of all, a lot of my colleagues have been able to, take solace in, okay, they can't rehearse or perform with their choir, but they can go play the organ. Well, simultaneous with the pandemic, we've had our organ at Trinity out being revoiced since July. So there's not even an instrument to go play. Um, I think, as a choir member at Trinity said to me once, he goes, I think that first rehearsal, when we're all back together again, we're not going to be able to sing. We're just going to cry for the whole 2 hours. Um, I think it will. I mean, I hope that, everybody says this, but I hope it's true that when we come out of this, it will mean so much more than it ever did. We took so much for granted. Um, and it has to be everything as we're
I think
doing
so.
it.
I really think so. I think what this entire lockdown has proven is just how crucial the arts are, just how badly we need this for our souls. Not just those of us who make the music, but the listeners. I mean, people miss live music. They miss the opportunity. I on Friday night, you know this, I sang from the sanctuary for the first time in a year, into my laptop. But Jim said, "Well, you went in with guns blazing," because I just sang my face off, like as big as I could. Like, it was just, I've just missed it. I have missed making music with a human so very much, and I love that. It's what I think of when I see that clip of you playing the handle is just how effortless you make it look. You really do. Your hands are in full control, and simultaneously just gently bouncing, like leaping over the keys. It is truly artistic, and just beautiful to watch. It really is. And I also love watching your hands conduct. This is another thing that I've talked to you about how, we connect on that level, how we love to kind of physically shape the sound with our hands. Do you prefer playing over conducting?
Actually, we talked about this the other day. Actually prefer singing more than anything. I mean, I love to conduct, I love to play, but I love to sing. And if I could make a full-time living just singing in a professional choir, of course, those days are over, because my voice at this age can't do the things it could 20 years ago. But yeah, I love singing, I love playing, and I love conducting.
But it's so interesting because you said, if I could make a living as a professional chorister, it's not about the solo singing. It's about the singing with other people. It's about the ensemble music making.
Yeah, when I part of my degree at St. Olaf was that I had to give a full organ recital, and I had to do a half voice recital. And let me tell you, I have never felt so naked on a stage when it's just me and a pianist, and then I'm singing, and I still can have nightmares about that. So solo singing is not particularly for me, but that singing with a group of people on a piece, either conducted or not, is truly amazing.
I'm going to step out of the realm of music for a second and ask you, what keeps you up at night?
It's funny, isn't it? I just was thinking about this the other night, in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. Um, it's either the past or the future. The present, if you're just centered in the present, you're fine. But if you start worrying about deadlines and projects that are coming up and things like that in the future, or as was the other night, I was having a dream about something that happened, in January of 1986, and I was like, oh, I've got to go get out my old calendars and find out what that was, because I had half of a memory, but not the full thing. And so I mean, generally it's the future and deadlines and emails and obligations and saying yes to too many things.
Sure. Sure.
So,
Um, I want you to tell the story about when your grandmother died.
so yeah, so I moved here in 1995, and um, I had come bounded into Cantor Rogers' office and introduced myself sometime early in that year, because I moved here in January. And then in September of that year, my grandmother came to the end of her life, and um, her actual dying process took a long time. I mean, there was a whole bunch of people around her bedside, and I had flown home a week before her death to see her one last time. But it was clear that um, just what we weren't able to know exactly when the time would be, and it came to be that uh, she died on Rosh Hashanah evening, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and prior to that, I knew this was imminent, and I really couldn't do anything about it. And I wasn't working at IHC, and I called Cantor Roger and said, could I get some tickets for the High Holy Day services? And I remember talking to my mother before the service, and then I went to IHC for only my second Reformed Jewish congregation experience of the High Holy Days, and heard Janice sing, the choir sang Esai Nai and Avinu Milkenu and all of that, of course. And then I came home after that service, and she had passed. So I've Cantor Roger and IHC and my grandmother's death are all kind of together in this nexus of September of 1995, and that's kind of a sweet memory to me.
I love that, and I love that I love that the boundary, like religious boundary, just doesn't exist when we are in our most vulnerable stages, right? That Judaism spoke to you and was an important part of your life when you were in Rochester, and when you came here and your grandmother was dying and it was a holy time in the Jewish calendar, you were not confined to kind of the religious space that you had chosen to work in or affiliate with. And I just think that's profound. I really do. I love that. So thank
I
you.
remember my first few years working in a synagogue, encountering all sorts of religious ceremonies that I'd never heard of, and I didn't know what they were going to be like and all of that. And I was glad to be there for 4 years to get that experience, and start to say, oh, what in the world is Yisker? Oh, that's like All Saints.
Right, right.
And realizing that regardless of what the religion is, the human need to celebrate or to mark or observe or to mourn is the same, and we just call it different things.
Right, right. I remember the first time, because of course I knew church music before, and so I had sung many settings of, as I lay me down to sleep. And then I remember in cantorial school going, oh, it's Hushki Venu. It's the same thing. So let's talk about this third example. So you're going to share an excerpt of Aaron Copland's In the Beginning.
Right. So Aaron Copland, American Jewish composer, not really known so much for his choral music, although certainly known as kind of the first distinctly American composer. What makes American music American? Well, think Appalachian Spring, think Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man. and so this is a piece called "In the Beginning." It's the first chapter of Genesis that he sets to music. Um, it is, as you can imagine, the 7 days of creation, and then the epilogue. It is truly one of the great choral masterworks, American choral masterworks. It runs about 25 minutes long, and the choir at Trinity is a very good choir, but I had my doubts that they could do the whole thing from start to finish and without, and this was, this performance was done at a national convention of the Association of Anglican Musicians. And so it was a high profile performance, and I came up with the idea that I thought, oh, well, if I ask Cantor Roger to chant each day of creation in Hebrew before the actual day in the piece, it'll break the piece up into 7 bite-sized pieces, and then the choir can have a relaxation while Cantor Roger chants. And so this is, I'm not going to play the whole thing, it's 25 minutes long, but this is day 4. This is, and God created the lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. It's very short. Let's see, here it is, and share screen.
And you are conducting.
This is me and the choir of Trinity. Me conducting choir of Trinity, and there's a solo mezzo who was one of our staff singers at the time.
My absolute favorite is how he ends each day. It's just perfect. I love it. Beautiful. Thank you. I want to, before we go into a lightning round, which is where I just kind of fire some quick questions at you, I want to just touch on the fact that you not only are this gifted musician and so busy and conducting and at Trinity and then playing all over the place. You also added B'nai Mitzvah tutor to your resume recently. I went on maternity leave.
Thanks to Sophia, yes.
Well, when I was pregnant with Sophia, that's right. Michael, having learned to read Hebrew years before, and we knew you could chant or kind of, you knew the trope. Well, you knew how to chant, but I taught you the trope, right? I said, listen, I'm going on this maternity leave. I'm teaching 26 students at the time. I said, I'd love for you to cover for me while I'm out on leave and just tutor. And I will share with you that when I came back, the students and the families had fallen so deeply in love with you that there was no question as to whether or not you were going to stay on. You very much were done tutoring students. And I was like, oh, you can't go anywhere because they love you and I can't possibly take on 26 students. And so, of course, Marv Goldstein is our other wonderful and gifted tutor. But you've been tutoring now for, gosh, it's been like 18 months, right?
Almost a couple of years. Yeah.
Almost a couple of years. Do you enjoy it?
I love it. It's just, kids, seeing the world through a child's eyes and encountering questions for the first time and all of that is just, it's so life-giving. But, seeing a kid excel and learn something and feel proud there's just nothing like it.
I think one of the best parts, and I also love it. I love B'nai Mitzvah tutoring. It's one of my favorite things to do.
And you're very good at it. I mean,
thank you.
I've had great teachers all my whole life in the organ and the choral work and all that. But you, the way that you teach it, it makes it interesting and logical. And I mean, I learned as much from you.
Thank you.
As anybody.
I think one of the greatest things is when, they come in and they're nervous and they really, really don't think they can do this. It is an enormous undertaking when you think about what we ask our kids to do. It's a lot. And the week before their B'nai Mitzvah, when you rehearse with them and see how much they've done and how far they've come, or the first time they stand there in the Torah rehearsal and read from the scroll and they look at you kind of stunned at what they just did. It's just really exciting. And so that is a gift that you give to our community. And I'm really grateful, as I know the entire clergy team and the families are as well.
Thank you.
So are you ready for my multiple questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Here we go.
What is the best instrument you've ever played on? Best organ, aside from the organ at Trinity. I'll get you out of that one.
Oh my gosh, I've been fortunate to play in some really wonderful places. One of the most beautiful is at the world headquarters of the Community of Christ in Independence, Missouri. It used to be called the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They were a break off of the Mormons, but they have a beautiful, beautiful temple and this fabulous organ. It may not be the most beautiful organ I've ever played, but maybe the most awesome situation that I've ever played the organ in was at Notre Dame in Paris. In 2015, I got to play a Saturday night concert, and the concert itself was great, but they keep the tour going, and so there's this low roar of people walking through the cathedral. And so the best part of actually was being locked in Notre Dame Cathedral the two previous nights from 8 p.m. till midnight, and having the place to myself and just going full guns.
That's amazing.
I'm so thankful that I got that opportunity before it burned.
Right.
But we know that it's going to be brought back even better.
Who is your favorite composer?
As like Cantor Roger said, that's like, who is your favorite child? My favorite composer is the composer of music that I'm playing right now. Certainly Bach, certainly Messiaen, French,
yes,
French organist. Those two kind of are the most singularly unique for the organ, and Duraflé. Duraflé, whose music is so informed by plain chant, the earliest music of the church, which of course we stole from the Jews.
I love Duraflé because it's so seemingly simple, but it's not. I love it. I haven't thought about that in years. What is a piece that moves you to tears every time you hear it?
Lately, there's a setting of a passage from Isaiah. It's called "The Lord is the Everlasting God." It was composed by my mentor at St. Olaf, Kenneth Jennings, who was the conductor of the St. Olaf Choir. He died back in 2015, but it's a aleatoric kind of unique piece of the first part, and then it settles into the Lord is the everlasting God. He shall lift you up like on wings like eagles. You shall mount up. It's a great passage, and it's a beautiful piece that the choir got to sing when we took our last tour to Britain. We were in residence for a week at Ely Cathedral, and we sang that in the Lady Chapel, and it was really stunning. And so just not only is the piece beautiful, but the association with the composer, who was my mentor, really moves me.
What about popular music? Do you have any popular music that you like?
So today at church, I played one of Chopin's Prelude, the C minor Prelude, and it reminded me of the Barry Manilow song, Could It Be Magic? And it reminded me of my youth. Of my idols were Elton John, Billy Joel, Barry Manilow, and to a certain extent later James Taylor. But those certainly the first three were all pianist singers, and
Right. I
yeah.
never realized we had Billy Joel in common. I'm a super fan. I don't know if you know that. And what's a piece that you dislike that most people love? Like, what could you really do without?
Oh man. First thing that comes to mind is Pachelbel Canon. A lot of people, and it's a beautiful piece. There's nothing wrong with the piece, but it's one of those pieces that everybody wants as they come down the aisle at their wedding. And it's like, oh, really? That's all you want? You don't want something bigger than that?
I'm sure the first 5 times it was done, it was beautiful.
Or the Vidor Toccata. I play the Vidor Toccata many, many Easters. It's a big, fabulous piece that everybody loves. And I play it because I have to, but I don't love it.
What is your favorite food? Because you are foodies. You and Mark are foodies.
We are omnivores. Yeah, actually not
I see.
anymore. Mark has become vegan for almost 3 years now, and I'm very happy to eat vegan because he's such a fabulous cook. But we tend to like ethnic foods. We like Middle Eastern, Asian, almost anything but steak and potatoes.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay, and where is the one place you would love to travel that you have not yet been?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, there are many places in Europe that I still have yet to see. Lately, I've been thinking of those South Pacific islands, where they're just so remote. Like I can't even think of the names of them now. Tahiti is one of them, but is it French Polynesia, where you see those beautiful hotels, and each one is a hut over the water. Yeah, I mean, lately I've been thinking about that, but actually, I don't think I could ever do it because the plane ride is just too long.
Really? Okay, so you won't do a long, what's your limit?
Well, I won't say that I won't, but I'll have to be heavily drugged to do that long of a flight. Yeah. It just drives me crazy.
See, my dad's a retired pilot, you know that, and he always says there's less traffic up there. What are you worried about? So here we are on the brink of the world reopening. You said this last Christmas that you were going to do 10 more Christmases at Trinity, right?
If they'll have me.
If they'll, God willing, I'm quite sure they would. But what is next for you?
We live at a time when people encounter like a third career or a second life after they quit working. And I mean, travel is a real passion of mine and Mark's too. And so I mean, if I had endless supply of money, I would just travel all over the world before I can't,
Sure.
But also, I'd love to continue to play even if I don't work, situation, in an employment situation. I'd still hope that I can play and sing in some fashion.
Is there anything musical you've never done that you'd love to do?
Well, gosh, there must be. If there isn't, I must be the most boring person in the world. Um, I I don't know. There surely must be some place I'd love to play. Actually, I'd love to play at King's College Chapel. I'd
Oh,
love to play a concert there.
well, we have a date in 2022, right? Didn't we say Bachfest of 2022 that we
I,
are going to Leipzig
I
um,
believe so.
without children? And so somebody will have to watch mine because we actually have in common, Michael and I, my mentor who taught me choral conducting, and I traveled the world with her and her ensemble. She happened to be a student at Eastman when Michael was the accompanist. When you were a doctoral student, she was doing her master's. So anyway, they are performing at Bachfest, and I keep saying that we have to go. Um, as we wrap up, I cannot overstate how beshert it is that you exist here and that I landed here. I truly feel like in this life, if you are lucky, you meet people who you are just supposed to cross paths with. And you absolutely are one of those people. You inspire me every single time we meet. We either are like chatting and eating tabbouleh and whatever, and then 2 minutes later, we will just have this powerful I thou moment connecting over something so deep. And I'm incredibly grateful for your passion and for everything you bring to the table because as a musician and as an artist, I feel like you bring your entire self to everything you do. No part of you makes music on autopilot ever. Ever. And I don't know that I can say that about anyone else I know. That, even the best of us have really tired days where we just get up and do something.
Oh, believe me, I have those.
But you, but there you are at the organ, distinctly aware of the privilege because it's not that if you start thinking about something else, you'll play the wrong notes. It's that I feel like subconsciously you know that the music deserves your attention. And that can't be taught. That's who you are as a musician. And so I just want to say thank you for
Um,
tonight and for everything that you bring to IHC and that you bring to me personally. I cannot wait until the world feels safe enough for me to give you a big hug.
Thank you. And I can't say just to you and to the congregation at IHC, it's one thing to come in and make music for the holiest of days in the fall, but it's another thing to be entrusted with teaching your kids. Um, and for that, I'm very grateful.
Well, we love you, and we're so thankful to have you at IHC, and we will look forward to connecting soon. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here tonight.
Thank you all for coming.
Join me next week at 7:30 p.m. Where we will have a very different hour. Dr. Sean Goodman Royer recently finished her Doctorate of Musical Arts in clarinet. She is a professor of clarinet at Marian University. She is also the head of our klezmer ensemble. She leads our klezmorum. And just a fascinating human being. And we will dabble in the jazz world next week. So please join me on behalf of myself, the clergy team, all of IHC. Michael, your gifts are endless and your humility is inspiring. Thank you. I love you. Have a great night. Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.